What's up, everyone? Chandler Adams here, back with Across the Board. I'm with co-host John Kaufman, as usual, and we have special guest Brendan Leister, analyst at PFF, assistant coach at Avon High School, and founder of LeisterFootball.com, where all you Browns fans can go right now and look at the entire roster, both sides of the ball, needs, and evaluating the players on the roster currently. Everything you'll need will be there. You can follow him at Twitter. Brendan, you want to drop your Twitter handle? I don't have it pulled up.
Yeah, it's just at Brendan Leister.
You can go there. I've been, paying close attention to that during these moves. A lot of great insight. And yeah, we're going to just break down the moves that the Browns have already made. We're going to break down moves that, we might see happen, or I guess what we would like to see happen. And then we're going to, maybe the last 10 minutes, if there's time permitting, we'll talk about moves that have happened, like Brady to the Bucs and that kind of thing. God, that sounds so weird off the tongue. But I guess the first move, the biggest move that kind of everyone saw coming a while back, is Jack Conklin, offensive tackle, coming to the Browns, $14 million a year for 3 years. So we didn't have to break the bank for him. I think he has $30 million guaranteed, right around there. What were your initial impressions on that, Brendan? I mean, is that a move that you liked, or just kind of, what'd you feel about that?
Yeah, I like the move. I think, it makes a big difference, like going into the draft, because now they're probably not going to feel the need to draft 2 tackles. I think there was a chance that they might take a first round tackle and then like swing another one later in the draft to maybe sign an older like free agent like Jason Peters, to just start for 1 season and then have a young guy come in a couple years. So yeah, this really, solidifies that position for 3 years, obviously. I think he's just a solid starting right tackle. Good fit in the system. Just a really good run blocker, especially on if you look at the splits, he's a really good blocker in the outside zone scheme, which is what they're going to be running a lot of. So that's a big deal. And I think another thing is, if you look at his true pass sets, you mentioned that. I know that his grade is not great. Or you mentioned that prior to the podcast, I should say. But yeah, he's not like a great pure pass protector. And I know that Tennessee, especially early on, they gave him a lot of help in pass protection with keeping in tight ends and chipping with backs and all that kind of stuff. But I think the way that the Browns are going to play, they're going to be able to help him in pass protection with using all the play action and the boots off wide zone. That's going to be how they throw the ball a lot. They're going to throw a lot of screens. The thing with Stefanski's offense is he does a lot of things to slow down the rush. And I know we didn't see that in the San Francisco game, obviously, in the playoffs because they were down. But The idea is with this offense, with all the weapons it has, with, looking at Mayfield in this offense, you have to project that he's going to get back to playing better. I mean, that's kind of what we all have to envision at this point, just being cautiously optimistic. So if he's playing better and the pass game is the way it should be, I don't think those true pass sets are going to happen too often, because I think the Browns should be in games with leads, not playing from behind. And so you won't have to worry about him pass protecting on an island too often where you're getting 5 receivers out all the time and all that kind of stuff. Also, with like all the 12 personnel, they're probably going to play with 1 back, 2 tight ends. There will be times where they keep, one of the tight ends in pass protection off play action, or maybe even go with a 7-man protection, go play action, take a shot down the field. And now all of a sudden, in those situations, maybe let's say you take 3 pass attempts a game just to take a shot in those situations. Well, now you've got a solidified pocket and everybody kind of has help because you've got 7 guys in protection. So I think the Browns are going to mix it up with the way that they throw the ball. And I would be a lot more concerned if he was going somewhere like, let's say Arizona, for example, where they're in 10 personnel a lot, 1 running back, 0 tight ends. They're a lot more spread out. The tackles are blocking on an island all day long. I think that would be much worse scheme fit. Whereas in Cleveland, they're going to have a fullback in a decent amount. They're going to play with 2 tight ends more often. They're going to mix up the personnel groupings. And also they're going to probably mix in the run a good amount, especially since Chubb's such a good running back. And I think he's such a good fit for this run scheme. So I like the fit a lot. And I also like the value. You alluded to, before the podcast also, you thought that he might get $18 million. And I was kind of under the impression he might, break the bank also. But I think that what we're seeing is the NFL's kind of, and I think the Browns hit on this 2 times actually. They took advantage of this, but I think the NFL's kind of archaic with the way that they value right tackles versus left tackles. There's still a money difference. There's still a difference between what the right tackles get paid, the top right tackles, and the top left tackles. And that just really doesn't align with what the data shows, because if you look at all the data that PFF has found, all the research that data scientists have looked at and all that stuff, they found that there's not really a statistical difference in the value between a right tackle and a left tackle. It's basically the same. And you look at a lot of the best pass rushers around the NFL, they're rushing from over the right tackle. So teams need good pass protectors. Just they need solid players at right and left tackle. It's not a deal where, it's not 1990 anymore where you can have this finesse left tackle that's a great pass protector and your right tackle is just a mauler. You need solid guys at both spots. And I think that's where the Browns kind of took advantage of the system a little bit and signed Conklin at a deal where they got him a little bit cheaper than people expected, and that's because he's a right tackle.
Yeah, I think that's something that I mean, not tooting my own horn, but this is the exact front office I envisioned. People wanted McDaniels, and that he would have brought in his own front office. But the way that Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski are able to adapt to the new data that's out there, they're not so stuck in their ways and egotistical that they think this is how it is, this is how I think, this is what needs to be done. And you're alluding to that with the data that's out there for the right and left tackles. That's something that we might not have seen with a guy like, John Dorsey, or you go to New York, Dave Gettleman, these football guys, because apparently analysts can't be football guys. I hate that. I hate that thought process, but that's something that the Browns absolutely needed. They needed something with more structure, not just, I have a feeling on this guy, I want him, or I didn't draft him, so I won't sign him back. That's a story for a different time. But John, what were your thoughts on the Conklin? It looked like you wanted to say something there.
Same. I mean, looking at the list of available tackles, once Costanzo re-signed with Indy, after that, Brian Bulaga signed with the Chargers. Andrew Whitworth just re-signed with the Rams.
Apparently he's Iron Man because they gave him a 3-year deal.
I know, right? He's 38. Jason Peters is, obviously a name that's come up for like a 1-year deal. And then obviously the Trent Williams from Washington, if he's still seeking a trade, which actually I did want to ask you, Brendan, if the Browns could get Williams for one of those 3rd-round picks, and it's like, I don't know, let's say it's going to be a 2-3-year deal, nothing crazy. What do you think for something like that is like an option, to give them flexibility for the draft and beyond?
I wouldn't be interested in that at this point because I don't like the idea of tying up that much cap space into the offensive line. I just think, the offensive line is important, but I think it's a lot more important to just have solid players across the board than it is to have like all pros across the board where you're paying them all a bunch of money. And the Browns already have a ton of money tied up into Treader, Bitonio, and Conklin now. So I think it's really important that they, for one, I'm predicting right now, I've been predicting all along, I just think they're going to take a left tackle in the 1st round. Before I was like, maybe it'll be a left tackle, right tackle, whatever. Like, I think they're going to take their left tackle at 10 or in a trade down. And that guy's going to be, their guy for a long time. They need to get a solid player there. But, 1st-round picks, they don't get paid that much. He'll be one of the higher paid players on the team. But still, it won't be like the Cowboys a few years ago. Like, the assets that they were putting into their offensive line was off the charts. It was insane. And they're only going like 8-8. And that's because you've got to allocate some of that cap room to the rest of your roster. You can't just put it all into the offensive line. And also, I've made this point before with some of the past offensive line coaches the Browns had, like Campen last year. But, like, if you got Bill Callahan, who you think is one of the best offensive line coaches in the league, why are you feeling the need to spend all this money on the O-line on 4 different spots, maybe even 5? Some people are talking about getting a veteran right guard that's better than what they've got too. Why are you doing that when this guy's supposed to be able to develop young talent? You should be able to at least use a little bit less money and take a little bit less of a cap hit and just spread it out across your O-line. So, yeah, I think going a little cheaper at left tackle. I know it is a first-round pick, but I just think the stars are aligning for that to happen. And then at right guard, I think it just makes sense to letting Wyatt Teller and Drew Forbes probably battle it out for that starting job.
So we don't have to, speak on this long because Drew Forbes has, almost as limited amount of tape as you can get out there on a NFL player. It's hard to find anything from. I'm pulling this out of my butt, but I think it's Southeastern Missouri or State or something like that university. Have you been able to watch him at all to get a feel on him? I just didn't know if you had because he came out with that Sports Illustrated story about him. I didn't know if you had ever seen tape on him or what your thoughts were on him, because we obviously saw Wyatt Teller, who I think played good enough with the talent around him, Treader and Batonio especially, and now Conklin coming in. But do you have any thoughts on Forbes, or if you've been able to watch him enough?
I just thought he was up and down in the preseason last year. I actually went through the whole. You guys might have seen it, but I've been tweeting out my depth chart that I update every year, and I update it when every move is made. And
you made me really fear this defense.
Yeah,
I did not realize just how.
Yeah, I've been doing that for a few years now. Yeah, so I actually went through and I have a color-coded copy that I've got for myself. I'm not tweeting it out because all the grades obviously are behind a paywall, and I don't want to share all that right now with Twitter for people that don't have PFF, but because that would be frowned upon. But I know Forbes graded, it was a 61.2 grade in the preseason, and that's okay. It's I'll just say he was up and down. So, I think that there's a chance though. There's Bill Callahan. They need to be able to get something out of one of those two guys. And I thought that Teller, early in the year he didn't play great. He was, I would say, up and down. But as the season went on, I thought he showed a lot more good things. And it kind of went out that way with the grades. His grade for the season was a 56.7, and I would consider that below average. But let's give these guys a chance to develop and see what they can do. If you've got one player on your whole offense that's, okay or maybe slightly below average, I think that you can manage. A lot of teams have a few guys like that. And also these guys don't project, in my opinion, to be complete black holes. I would say, I've been talking about that a lot with the defense. They had a lot of black holes on defense last year if you look at the grades for the season. And these guys don't look like black holes like Eric Kush was early last year. I would say these guys look more like okay. And I think you can win on the offensive line with okay, especially if it's just your fifth guy. So,
well, your point about
Cam Irving
Callahan
is on a Super Bowl team.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
But the point about Callahan, though, is really good because you're absolutely right. Why bring in a coach to that caliber if you don't think that he can, develop, obviously, some of the younger guys that you have on the roster. So that's first and foremost. Second of all, whenever you see, especially ESPN lately, they've keep putting up this pass block win rate chart that they have. And they talk about how when the dichotomy with the Browns is essentially the tackles on the ends were dreadful, 134th and lower. And then the interior part, Treader, Batonio, and Teller were, fairly good, or actually really good. And so I guess I think I was thinking of it like they're going to need to find three linemen, the both tackles in the right guard spot. But after seeing some of this, and hearing you talk about it, it doesn't seem like you're saying Teller is, this massive hole. That's probably a wait and see spot. And if you there's no, like you said, there's no reason to go out and sign, some veteran guy for, whatever money, because you can just as easily have the guy already on your roster in Wyatt Teller.
Right. And it also might get to day 3. And I know that everybody does the mock drafts and the projections and all that stuff. And everybody wants to just go need. Well, that's not reality. It's just not. And when you're sitting there, making picks on draft day, on draft weekend, and it gets to the 5th round, if there's a guard that somehow fell to you that you have maybe a 3rd round grade on, and your offensive line coach loves him, you're going to take him. If he's the best player on the board, you're going to take him. And people at home are like, why are we taking a guard? I thought they liked Teller, but that's just not the way this works. It's just not. So, that might happen. And maybe that guy wins the job. And, then they'll have a 5th-round rookie starting for him. But Callahan maybe did a hell of a job with him in training camp.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think, there's options on the table. But I think that right guard spot needs to be a cheap player for 2020.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. So we can kind of use this as going into the next player, which is Austin Hooper, but I'm not sure. I haven't looked into it enough, but is there data out there available by PFF that suggests that, the better weapons you have, which if you look at the Browns, they had a bad year last year. Most players underperformed, but they've got a hell of a wide receiver duo. They've got one of the best backs in the league, have a quarterback who showed a lot of promise his rookie year and had a big slump his second year. And now you've got 2 tight ends who, at Austin Hooper, I like the pickup. I do want to warn people that, there's data by PFF that shows he basically can't win a one-on-one matchup. I mean, I over-exaggerating here, but, whoever's watching this right now, you could probably guard him one-on-one. He wouldn't get open. Obviously, he'd get open. But his one-on-one matchup wins last year were almost non-existent. He did a lot. He had to, get open, whether it was underneath or finding holes in the zone. But is there, data out there that suggests the better, weapons you have, obviously the cheaper your O-line can be, or is that just something that makes sense in your head but doesn't really pan out in real life?
Yeah, so it kind of goes with, I've talked about it a lot, and we'll probably get to it more when I talk about defense or when we talk about defense. But I know that having receivers that can separate early in the down definitely benefits your quarterback. So if your quarterback's on the same page with your receivers and the ball's coming out on time, I mean, we didn't see a lot of that last year, but it was just a mess from a coaching standpoint. If Stefanski and all those guys have the offense clicking, yeah, having weapons and Mayfield being confident and comfortable and getting the ball out of his hand at the top of his drop, like we saw a lot in 2018 when I thought he was really well coached by Zampese and really well prepared. He really knew where to go with the football a lot of times during that season, and he wasn't holding it forever like he did so often in 2019. His pocket presence looked a lot better because he was more sure of himself and he knew where to get the ball out, and he didn't take all the pressures and sacks that he did last year. So, yeah, if we see that, absolutely. I mean, there has been data that showed that really, the offensive line always gets talked about because people talk about winning in the trenches and all that. But really, the more data that comes out and the more that the data scientists work on it, the more that they've found that really the most valuable players are the ones that, it's the quarterback, it's the guys that catch the ball and score the touchdowns, and it's also the guys that cover those guys. And that's the 3 most valuable pieces. So, yeah, I think Austin Hooper, to get into him a little bit, I think it's a really good fit with Mayfield and just what he does. One of the things with him is I noticed this at Oklahoma. It's stood true ever since, and sometimes even last year it would lead to interceptions, which I kind of thought might happen when I saw him, when I studied him at Oklahoma. But when he misses, he tends to miss high. And, he has receivers that can play big, and hopefully the more that he plays with them, they can go up and get the ball more often and make those catches that sometimes he just misses on slightly. Hopefully this upcoming season his mechanics are better and he doesn't miss high so often. But I think having Hooper, who he plays like his last name. I told my wife what he plays like, and he's like, oh, so he plays like a basketball player. I was like, yeah, you're right. He plays like a Hooper. I mean, he does. He can go up and get the ball in traffic. Fantastic at going up and getting the ball. That's probably his best trait, I would say, is he's just got great hands, never drops the ball. Very, very much people talk about with young quarterbacks that they need that security blanket in the tight end. Well, he is exactly that. He's going to catch the ball when it's thrown to him. He's going to find the soft spots between zones and slow down his route for the quarterback, not to run to be covered. I think sometimes we don't notice that stuff when we watch games, but those are little things that happen where guys, get behind one linebacker and then the next one's a few yards away. Well, you got to slow down your route a little bit to make sure that you're still open when the ball comes out and toward you. So, yeah, I think he's a really good fit with Mayfield. The contract, again, I think they kind of hit on a market inefficiency here. I mean, yeah, he's the highest paid tight end, but the thing with that is tight ends just aren't paid very much. And like Joe Banner tweeted about this, and he said he was shocked that it wasn't more. He was like, this market needs reset. Kelsey and Kittle, I mean, those guys, whatever they're going to get paid, it's got to be astronomical whenever it happens. But the tight end position is just not at that point. And so I think the Browns realized that, and they knew that they were going to play a lot of 12 personnel this year, and they wanted to get that security blanket for Mayfield. And also just like over the middle of the field, like think about all the times that he would throw a high pass to Demetrius Harris and the ball just goes off his hands. Maybe it gets intercepted.
Yeah.
He's not going to be precise all the time. And sometimes, I mean, I'm hard on quarterbacks because I coach quarterbacks and I expect the placement to be spot on all the time. So I expect a lot from Mayfield as an analyst. But sometimes those high balls, you want them to be completed. I mean, it's just facts. The ball can't be on the face mask every single time. They're not all going to be perfect. And so with Austin Hooper, there's a much bigger catch radius, and I think that's going to benefit them. Whenever the signing was made, I predicted that he's probably going to score between 5 and 8 touchdowns next year, I would imagine, because they're just, he's just the type of player in the middle of the field that Mayfield's going to love. And I think another thing with him too, at the intermediate level, is like when he's working between zones, or even if he doesn't gain separation, if it's man-to-man in a one-on-one matchup, I think Mayfield has the ability to put the ball on his body or put it in a spot where he can go and box the guy out and make catches. So even though he's not great at separating, I think Mayfield has that mentality and that aggressiveness that he'll make those throws to him, because I think he'll trust him. And maybe Matt Ryan didn't do that all the time when he was covered. I haven't gone into the tape that much to really study that aspect, but that's just something to consider, is that Mayfield has a really aggressive mindset, and I think he'll love forcing the ball to Hooper even when he's covered, and some of those balls are going to be completions.
Yeah, I subscribe to PFF, so I love to read the QB annuals. The first time I tried to read one, I had to like take 12 breaks just reading the descriptions of the things because I couldn't comprehend it. Now that I look at it every year, and especially Baker's rookie year, it really is amazing the window he can get balls into with, not a lot of, separation on quarterback. Hopefully it was, mechanics and coaching and, all that. Just everything leading up to game day that was wrong with him last year, and hopefully he can get back to that, and Hooper can help him out with just using his body to shield off defenders if he's not able to win one-on-one. But John, I know you really like the signing, so what do you have to say about it?
Just a couple things real fast. First of all, they asked him, Austin Hooper, what he thought about this, and he came right out and said, "I picked Cleveland. This is where I wanted to be. Like, I like
Never
Baker
heard
Mayfield. I think it was I read the quote and I was like, well, this is fantastic. Like, you don't, first of all, you never hear this. It's always the stigma of, well, you have to trade for Jarvis Landry because you can't, he's not going to come here. So you have to give up, something to get him.
Yeah.
And for a while there, I don't blame anyone for thinking that was true, because it probably was. It was going to be a tough sell to get somebody to come here.
Charlie Fry's every tight end stream quarterback.
Right, of course, naturally. Right, yeah. Do I get to work with Brandon Whedon? Yes. So, but yeah, I mean, he just came right out and said, like, this, this offense is on the way up. I like, Baker's, an awesome quarterback. Like, this is where I want to be. So how can you not love that right off the get-go? Second of all, the money is fantastic. Like you said, it's $44 million, so he makes $11 a year on a 4-year deal. He's the highest paid tight end. But yeah, I mean, he's going to make, when Hopkins' deal gets redone with Arizona, it's going to be $20 million, right around there. So he'll make about half what Hopkins makes. And I'm not saying that Hooper and Hopkins are the same player by any stretch, but like, I mean, Hooper in 13 games last year was 97 catches, 787 yards, 6 touchdowns. I mean, 97 catches on an $11 million a year guy, like, that's phenomenal. That's unbelievable value. So, that part stood out to me. It was really great, for the money. And then again, like you said, like, he's not Kelsey, he's not Kittle. Like, that's obvious, right? He's nowhere near the athlete that those guys are. And no one would ever say anything, otherwise. So, but that's okay. That's not, this guy is, like you said, Brendan, just, find, the soft spot in the zone, sit down, run really smart routes and be where you need him to be. And just, catch the ball. Like his ability to catch it with his hands away from his body is unbelievable. I mean, highlight after highlight last year, where he just, it looked like it was not going to be a catchable ball or something, and he made a lot of things look routine. That was pretty difficult. There were pretty difficult throws. So yeah, I'm excited about this guy. I mean, I think one of the issues with the Browns last year was, very famously, the red zone struggles. They get down to the red zone against Buffalo and other teams, and you're just like, when you look at the offense, there isn't a guy that the defense is really afraid of just from a physical standpoint, right? And I know they had their issues getting the ball to Beckham, but like Beckham and Juice aren't the biggest guys. And, so you add him to the mix, and now all of a sudden it's like, damn it, like maybe that fade, that little quick fade, whatever, is not the highest percentage play, but at least it's an option now. At least it's in their minds that this could happen. And it's just one more thing you have to worry about. So the more ways you can, threaten a defense, whether it's perceived threats or real, I mean, that's important. And that's what this guy does. And yeah, I really like this signing a lot. I mean, it's fantastic. And like Brendan, like you said, also in 2 years, 3 years, when Kittle and Kelsey redo deals and everybody else, this guy will be the 6th highest paid tight end. You know what I mean? It'll look like, wow, what a bargain, and when he's done off and he's 25 as well. So again, he'll be,
Right.
28 when he's done with his contract. So yeah, this is an A+ for me. I really love this signing. So good job, Andrew Berry.
Yeah. Yeah. Another thing I was like you were mentioning, he's not Kittle or Kelsey, obviously. Nobody's really like those guys, but he is a lot like Zach Ertz, who definitely gets a lot more hype than him. But like Zach Ertz, I wasn't a fan of him coming out of college, and it was for the same reasons that people don't like Hooper. Like, not a great athlete, also just not a very good blocker, which I may be overrated at that point in time. But still, like, there was just nothing like fantastic about him. Like, I loved Eifert compared to him. I loved Kelsey compared to him. But the thing is, Zach Ertz is so good at just, finding soft spots in zones, just getting that little, like, tiny, just a step of separation and then catching the ball with his hands. Quarterback can always throw it to him, like Wentz and Foles over the years of just, throwing him 1,000 targets, it seems like, and he just comes down with the ball every time. If it's third down, go to him. They put him in the slot. They put him in, as a wing, in line, outside, whatever. I think Hooper I think he can be used that way too. They can move him around probably a lot more than Atlanta did. And I did hear someone say that the Browns felt that he was underutilized, which is funny because you just mentioned that he had nearly 100 catches, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think they felt probably like his skill set had more that could be, there was more juice to squeeze out of the orange, so to speak.
Yep.
So yeah, I think that's something to keep in mind. And Andrew Berry was around the Eagles for the past year, so maybe he saw that up close and just felt, and maybe that was something that he took away from that quarterback needs that security blanket that Ertz has always been for those quarterbacks.
Yeah, I like that point.
Yep.
And you don't have to talk on it long because obviously we still want to get to the 2 more signings and we don't have to harp on long. But then the defense, I think, is important to talk about. But real quick, because I know this is in a lot of Browns' minds, what do you think this means for Njoku, who has been pretty underwhelming as a first-round pick, especially for a tight end? But, you can watching Njoku, you can never deny his size and athleticism. It's outstanding. But he's had catching problems. Last year, whatever the hell was going on with him and Freddie, it's really hard to speak on anything that happened last year. No players are talking about it, which is a good thing. But, do you think this helps Njoku maybe get a better matchup? He'll probably get, unless teams are smart and want to, not try to cover 2 tight ends like this with linebackers, but there are probably still teams that will try that. Do you think this helps him get better matchups? Do you think, this maybe takes his practice up a little bit? I don't know if that's a thing that really happens. I think these players are probably working their ass off anyway. They're in the NFL. But what do you think this means for Njoku?
Well, I think one thing that it does is it puts like a veteran that's, been successful in the room with him. I got a vibe, I get just, this is corny, but my wife, like, I'm good at reading people. I just am. I'll just be honest. I am. I get I'll get a first impression on someone and I can read them. And I'll just say, I never thought Demetrius Harris was good for the room last year. I don't think he was good for the room. I just don't. And that was just the vibe that I got from, following along on social media, looking at him in training camp, watching practice habits. Just you watch him on game day, the way that he would play, even in preseason, like just a very nonchalant player. Like that's not a good veteran to have around David Njoku as he's trying to develop. Like he's still a really young player. He's like 22, 23 years old or whatever. I think having Austin Hooper around him will be a good thing for him. He'll see what a guy on his second deal that has been around success. Like he's been to the Super Bowl. He was with Kyle Shanahan. He played with Matt Ryan for a long time. That's going to benefit Mayfield too. Having, a guy that played with Matt Ryan all those years. Now he's going to come to Mayfield. He's going to be able to tell him some things like, hey, we did it this way. This worked. But yeah, like I think that's going to be just good for Njoku's development, just being around him all the time and seeing the practice habits and in the meeting rooms and all those types of things. Because I think having a veteran presence that counts for something. And the Browns just did not have enough of that across the roster last year. There was just a ton of players. I think it goes beyond the obvious ones, which I'm kind of alluding to right now. I think even like Greg Robinson got benched for the New England game. There's more to that than just playing poorly. Like he had his best pass protecting game of the season against Seattle. Then the bye week happens. Then he gets benched against New England. Like that's not just a coincidence, So there was a ton. And then we hear obviously the weed thing in the offseason. So there was just a whole bunch of players that was issues. So I think that'll benefit Njoku. Also, I think last year it's just such a fluky type thing with him. Like Mayfield made an awful play on the play where he got hurt, where he could have thrown it to him a lot earlier. And then I think he scrambled or whatever. He held the ball forever. And then he throws it to Njoku high in traffic. And then he comes down. And it looks like he almost broke his neck. He breaks his wrist in the process. Like that was just a very fluky injury. So, I mean, his season, it was just like I said, just a fluky situation. And also, I always think back to the back half of 2018. I mean, Njoku became a very, very reliable weapon for the offense.
And red zone target.
I tweeted the numbers out a few days ago. I don't remember exactly what it was. I don't have it in front of me. But, I mean, he was consistently making plays. He only had one drop. And this was all after Hugh got fired, because the team played with they played with a fire under their ass after he got fired. And he only had one drop in the back half of the season. He caught, I don't know, 30 some balls. I think he had one or two touchdowns in the back half of the season. So like he played really well, and he was the 6th highest graded tight end in the NFL in the back half of 2018. So if they can get him back to playing like that next to Hooper, and like you alluded to, if he gets some of those bad matchups where maybe the defense puts a safety on Hooper or a nickel on Hooper, but they put a linebacker on Njoku, well, now you're in a situation where, he's going to cook. And so I just think, gives them really good personnel for running 12 personnel as much as they're going to. And Njoku and Hooper are both guys that you can split them out wide. You can play them in the slot. You can play them, all over the offense. And it just gives you more movable chess pieces. One of the first things that Stefanski said was that he wants to be multiple. And that move with Hooper, which was something I didn't really think would happen because I thought they might have more faith in their second and third tight ends. But the more that I think about it since it happened, the more I like the Hooper signing, and the more I think it's really going to benefit Njoku's development.
Yeah, my girlfriend always makes fun of me because, the day David Njoku was drafted, outside of obviously Myles Garrett, I was just so excited for Njoku because, just his size and his speed at the tight end position, I absolutely loved. And, I'm still, whether I'm, I have way too much faith in him or not, he's one of my favorite players on the Browns, but she always, talks about how he drops passes and he played badly, and I try to say what you said, like he had a fluke injury, and then I was at the Bengals game in Cleveland when he got hurt and dropped the ball and they called it an interception or whatever the hell. That play was just so ugly.
Yeah, that
was ugly. That place got so loud, and it went from packed to absolutely like 10 fans in the stadium after that. But I really like Njoku. I think there are going to be a lot of teams with football guys running it, and they're going to try to match David Njoku up or even Austin Hooper up with a linebacker, which is just a terrible idea. But I'm all for that. But yeah, I think that's great points with, having Austin Hooper in there, who at 25 has seen a lot in his NFL career and has played with a lot of great players, including Julio Jones and Matt Ryan, just for starters, and being around a mind like Kyle Shanahan and, seeing up close and personal what Rob Gronkowski can do to you in the Super Bowl. But it was, he's seen a lot, and, Njoku's going to want that second contract, so there's a lot he can learn from him. But these are two signings, the Case Keenum and Janovich. I probably didn't pronounce that right, but
no, you did.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I don't pronounce a lot of names right on here. Yeah. Those are two signings we don't have to talk long about. I just want to know your thoughts on the Case Keenum deal. I think $6 million a year, or I think it's okay. It's a nice backup price. Case Keenum's, I would say, a top tier backup quarterback. I think it'll help Baker Mayfield. Case Keenum's played in some pretty big games. He's been around the league for a long time. I don't really love the narrative that, Baker wasn't trying last year because he didn't have a backup. He didn't have a quarterback pushing him. I think Baker Mayfield's a pretty hard worker. I don't think that's going to change it. But kind of what your thoughts are on Case Keenum coming in, and then obviously Janovich, trading him for a 2021 seventh is a good value, but kind of what he brings in your eyes.
Yeah, so Keenum was a guy that I wanted, ever since the season ended and they hired Stefanski. I just thought that it was a perfect fit.
Yeah.
I started thinking about that before they even hired Stefanski. I was just thinking if they get him as the coach, I think bringing Case Keenum just makes all the sense in the world. I've seen him in press conferences because the Vikings do a really good job of like getting their coaches like on video, just asking them a lot of questions and stuff. So you really get to hear them, give a lot of opinions on things. And it would be cool if they did that with the Browns coaches, honestly. But I just remember hearing him talk about Case Keenum and how he was just coach's son, like does all the right things, like really good, like does everything the right way, just all the cliche stuff, but he clearly meant it. And you could tell that that's really how he feels about him. And I think, again, situation where, like, I don't know, people have alluded to the quarterback room being kind of like cliquey last year, where it was just a situation where like they're all like buddy and isolated from the rest of the team, including the quarterback's coach, which you never want to see because a player is going to get complacent when their coach is that way with them all the time. And that showed up on the field too with the fundamental things and stuff. But I think having Van Pelt, who Rodgers, has talked about how Alex Van Pelt coached him hard and he actually appreciated that and it made him a better quarterback, he felt. Having a guy that's going to coach Mayfield hard on his fundamentals all the time and have high standards. Stefanski is a guy that's the same way, even though he doesn't come across that way all the time, maybe to the media, with some of the like dry humor and sarcasm that he shows. And then having Keenum with him all the time in the QB room as well. I think that's just a lot of good influences for Mayfield as he develops in this really huge, pivotal year 3. Like they really have to get this right. And I think it's worth the money to have that guy in there. Another thing is like, they're just like, they're similar sizes too. Like it's funny how the offense can be kind of the same if Mayfield goes out and he goes in. Like they just play similar games. It's just that Mayfield has a much bigger arm and he's a lot more talented of a player with better instincts. But we did see the magic that, Keenum had tossing it up to Thielen and Diggs back in 2017. So, I think it's cool to have a good, reliable backup, but most of it is for his veteran presence and some of what I talked about with the potential with Hooper in the tight end room. And then with Janovich, tweeted this, but I was thinking that it would be smart for them to go after a fullback in undrafted free agency, but trading a 2021 7th round pick, that's exactly the same as undrafted free agency, but they just got a veteran that's, good at everything you want a fullback to be good at. He's good on special teams. He can catch. He can run the ball some. He's a good run blocker. And he's also a good pass protector. So like he does everything you want a fullback to do. It's just Denver gave him away because they're not going to use a fullback anymore. So there's kind of a market inefficiency on fullbacks. Not all the teams use them. So it's really easy to get one of the best ones. And so the Browns were able to do that. And now they have a new starting fullback. And, he's going to play 5 to 15 snaps a game probably when they go 21 or 22 personnel. But as long as he does his job well in those situations, I think it's a good pickup for them.
I agree. John, what did you think about the Keenum pickup?
I mean, bottom line is this: like, you either have a backup quarterback in the NFL that you reasonably think could win a game for you if they had to start, or you don't. It's that simple. Like, there's very, very few of those guys. Really, really few, right? Most of the time, if your quarterback gets hurt and you have to put the backup in, it's just like, this is, you have Pittsburgh season where you're like, somehow Mason Rudolph is worse than Duck Hodges. Like, I don't even know how that's possible, but this was, that was just a train wreck of a shit show. So
yeah, you have to hope on a defense that way outperforms their ability. They're a good defense, but that defense, it's something that we'll talk about when we get to the defense. Defense is really hard to repeat at a super high level year in and year out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and
sorry, I interrupted you.
No, you're fine. I mean, that's a good point. Like, they were winning games because of that defense, basically, but they couldn't. They went weeks in a row without scoring an offensive touchdown, and so, I mean, like I said, you just, Anyways, the bottom line is Keenum is a guy that you're reasonably sure he could, he might be able to win a game, right? I'm not saying he's going into Kansas City and going to lead when you're down 21 or whatever, but home game against, I don't know, Cincinnati or, just some random team. Like, I think you'd be reasonably confident if things are going well and not a lot of injuries and stuff like that. Yeah, Keenum might be able to start this game and win. So, but I mean, I don't know. That's probably, and it's basically the Chase Daniel deal. I think it's like the exact same money in terms and everything like that. So, it's like what you get
take
for
Keenum over Daniels.
Exactly. And that's a good point. Yeah. And I would too. Absolutely. So, I mean, Keenum, I think he won a playoff game with Houston. I think
he took the Vikings to the NFC Championship. That was what I was alluding to.
Oh, yeah.
Minnesota Miracle.
That was the craziest play I've ever seen in my life.
Yes, that's right. Yes, that's a good
Terrible
point.
tackling.
I think he had what? I mean, his year, it was like 27 touchdowns and 7 picks. It was something ridiculous. He obviously played above his head. And I think even his PFF grades were like, it kind of showed that a lot of that was just the receivers. Like, he wasn't making great plays. He was just kind of tossing it up, and those guys were dominant. And that was the way that season just kind of went for them. They just had a lot of good luck. But, I mean, Stefanski was his QB coach that year, so he was with him every day in the room. He knows the type of guy he is, and that was an easy connection to make. And I'm glad they made that move. I think something that stands out with all 4 of the moves they made is the targeted guys. They got them. They wanted those guys. They wanted to shore up the offense. You just talked about how it's hard to sustain defense over time. Well, I mean, that's another thing the data shows is, like, offense, quarterback play, passing. Like, those are the things that are most stable and most predictive of winning over time. Defense, it's hard to keep a good defense together year after year. A lot of defense is based on the defensive coordinator, how he puts guys in certain matchups and mix and matches personnel. I mean, that's huge. Also, who you're playing in a given week. Like, if you're playing the Chiefs, your defense is probably going to have a bad week. It's just facts. You better score a lot of points or you're not going to beat the Chiefs. You're not going to stop them. It's just the way it is. Like the Rams 2 years ago, they're putting up 30 points a game. Well, your defense is probably not going to stop the Rams. You better score a lot of points on offense. So it just shows, like, offense year to year is much more predictive. We've seen teams like the Jaguars 3 years ago, the Bears 2 years ago. I think it's about to happen with San Francisco a little bit, where they're going to take a step back. These teams that are all predicated on defense, like, it's hard to sustain. And again, and also here's another thing with the coverage. I alluded to coverage being so valuable earlier. Well, I mean, one issue with coverage is that it's unstable year to year. So players, you might cover well one year, but it's hard to sustain that year after year. And that's what makes guys like Richard Sherman, for example, or Stephon Gilmore so special, is that those guys have been able to sustain that success over time. But in general, it's just so much harder to predict when a guy's going to have a down year in coverage. And that's just another thing that makes defense so unstable and unpredictable year to year.
Yeah. There's we'll slide right into defense because I thought you brought up a really great point that I want to hit back on, but I did want to just wrapping up the offense. It's just it's amazing what this front office is doing. I can't remember if it was before we started recording, Brendan, but you said something about I think the Browns have a limit, and they're not willing to go over that limit for mediocre players that the contracts are going to look bad a year or maybe even halfway into next season, and it's been a long time. It's been not in my time since the Browns have been able to go out in the free agent market, get their top target, and pay them less than what the market value is. So I think that's it's a step in the right direction. And Andrew Berry at such a ripe young age, like I'm the youngest GM in the NFL, and he's not making moves he's not feeling nervous like he has to go make a big splash on a mediocre player, which blowing me away. I think he's handling this really well, getting the players they need, not overpaying for them. That cannot be stressed enough. But you brought up, in your tweet earlier, I read your tweet, how you talked about how defense is more predicated on who your defensive coordinator is and then matchups, obviously. But so was a guy like Chris Harris Jr. ever someone that you thought the Browns should target? Because he's a great slot. He's a great nickel cornerback. But the problem is, you just said it, it's hard to tell when a guy might have a down coverage year. And Chris Harris Jr. is getting up there in age. So is defense something that, you try to fill in with value players, go on the free agent market or in the draft, try to get players for, maybe a little under the market value? Or is it all, or do you have to have a good mix of value players and also, people that are going to be paid highly, like Myles Garrett, and obviously if you can get a Stephon Gilmore? But you know what I mean? Is it something that you want to have a good mix of, or maybe spend all your money on offense and just try to get value on defense?
I think we're kind of seeing it right now. I mean, we're about to see how the Browns attack defense. My opinion on it is, I shared the article today that Eric Eager from PFF wrote, and he looked at the data on, looking at stars, like players that grade really, really well, obviously year to year, the top players on defense, whether it's cover players and edge players and defenses, how they play, actually the efficiency and the success rate of those defenses based on the number of solid players they have, going down the list. So not only your first best cover player, but your second cover player, your third, your fourth, your fifth. On a defense at one time, you have 7 guys because you usually rush 4. So you have 7 cover players out there potentially. Obviously, the offense only has 5 guys that can get out into routes. But he looked at that down the list, and then he looked at pass rush, and he was trying to figure out if defense is more star dependent or if it's more, he called it depth dependent. So that's the depth of players that you have across your defense. So like I said earlier, you can't have black holes. Well, the Browns had like 5 or 6 black holes last year on defense that played like 500 plus snaps for them. Well, can I cuss?
Yes, you can cuss.
Sure.
Yeah, you're fucked if you've got 5 or 6 black holes on defense. It's just facts.
Woo!
And part of that was, part of that was usage. Part of that was, just guys being forced maybe to play more than they should have. But yeah, they were screwed, and they ended up with the 28th highest overall grade. People can make excuses for Steve Wilkes and all that stuff, but the facts are a bunch of guys regressed and played poorly and underperformed, and the defense was really, really bad. And we can, you can talk about like the average yards given up or whatever it is, but that's not what I pay attention to. I pay attention to the grades because that's an indication of how individual players are performing. And if you have more individual players performing well, your defense is going to be better. So, yeah. But anyway, in the data that he found that it's kind of like offensive line. He did the same thing for O-line, that it's more about having a lot of solid players than it is about just having that one stud that you're allocating all these resources to. So having like a solid second, third, fourth rusher, having a solid third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh cover player, having all those players on the field is huge for a defense because they're, maybe they get beat every third play, but they're not getting beat every time they get attacked in coverage. Just kind of to make a point, because defense is all about obviously just slowing down the offense and just trying to get stops. We focus on the splash plays sometimes, but I think those things have been found to be like unstable, like turnovers. They're very unpredictable. Sometimes a defense, like with Greg Williams, we saw a couple years ago, they were leading the league in turnovers. They had 20 or whatever it was in the first 5 weeks of the season, because they had the huge turnover game against Pittsburgh where they had 5 picks. And then the back half of the year, they had no turnovers. And that's because turnovers are just not very stable. With defense, really what it's most about is, turnovers matter. They turn games, obviously. Turnovers are very valuable. But what I'm saying is, if you want to be focused on the things that are predictive and consistent, have a lot of solid cover players, get those guys on the field however you can and get them all together, playing together. I don't care if they're corner, nickel, safety, linebacker. Get all the solid guys that can cover on the field and all your rushers, whether that, given the situation, get all the guys that can rush. If it's a pass down, get all your rushers on the field. I don't care if the defensive tackles, edge players, if a linebacker's maybe better at blitzing, but he's worse in coverage, let's bring him up on the line of scrimmage, take out a defensive tackle, let him blitz. But having lots of guys that can just do a solid to good job is huge key to being successful on defense.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And so, John, I'll let you dissect this in a second, but Brendan, I'm going to put you on the spot real quick with another question, kind of going off what you just said. So, and first of all, Eric Eager does great work at PFF. Love listening to him on the podcast he does. I think it's Forecast. But so when a guy like Myles Garrett contract comes up, is that a guy that you personally would pay the money he's going to? There's a good chance Myles Garrett becomes the highest paid defensive end ever until, probably maybe Nick Bosa right now, Chase Young, whoever it might be, comes up. Because, Myles Garrett is on the leaderboard for sacks last year, and he played half the season. An absolutely generational talent, but, the data says go get consistent players that aren't black holes, and paying someone like Myles Garrett when you have to pay someone like Baker Mayfield eventually might make you have a black hole or two on defense. So what's your personal opinion on that?
My personal opinion would be, I think it's a position, although it's not quite, by the numbers, it's not quite as valuable as the receivers, the corner or cover players, I should say. Yeah, corners. It's behind those, but it's just barely behind those, edge players. And the other thing is, I said that cover players, coverage is unstable year to year. Well, that's the good thing about pass rush, is that it's stable. So that's where the debate between coverage and pass rush, there's still some debate over it, because the pass rushers, Myles Garrett, he's going to be a top pass rusher for the next 8 years. Maybe, probably 10 plus years. He's going to be one of the top 5 to 10 pass rushers in the NFL. You're getting that year after year after year with him. So that, in my opinion, that's worth paying for long term. But I do think, and I would be open-minded to this, I would be interested to see, hey, what can we get for him in a trade? I would just be curious about it. Because look at what Khalil Mack brought for the Raiders. They could have easily won that trade. Now, here's the thing. People thought that was gonna send the Bears to the Super Bowl, but the problem is it's so, we've talked about already with defense, it's so hard to keep them together. They've already lost a lot of players from their defense. If Trubisky would have been good, they would have maybe made it to the Super Bowl or won the Super Bowl. But the defense wasn't the reason. Khalil Mack wouldn't have been the reason. The reason, really, the thing that would have been shooting them over the top and getting them at Super Bowl win would have been Trubisky playing fantastic. So there is a debate to be had, and this is why a lot of analytics people thought the Raiders really, like from a process standpoint, because they didn't have to pay Khalil Mack so much money, they thought that they did come out better in that trade because they got 2 first-round picks and a second-round pick, I believe, maybe even 2 seconds. But it was a lot of early picks.
It was a big
and they also didn't have to allocate so much cap space to that one player, because when you allocate the cap space to that one player, like you just said, it really ties your hands, and it might lead to you having more black holes, so to speak, across your roster. So there is a debate to be had, but I would lean toward paying him because he is such a, young, dynamic player, such a great pass rusher, just down after down, year after year. Even if it's not quite as valuable as some other positions, at least you know what you're going to get from him. And that's not also, this isn't to say that stars aren't important. We're not saying that you want just a bunch of like related to PFF grades. Like, you don't want to just roll out a bunch of 70s. Like, your entire defense is just all 70s. Like, that's not what we're saying. Like, you want some guys to be closer to 90. Like Myles Garrett was an 86.5 last year. Like, you love to have some guys like that. But all that I'm saying is when you have Mac Wilson at 42.9, like Larry Ogunjobi's at 56, good luck to you. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I know this is something that John and I have talked about, kind of, I guess, going into players that you might, want to look at in free agency. We've talked about how I love Larry Ogunjobi. He's one of my favorite players, named my cat after him after his rookie year, but he's performed poorly these past 2 years. It's time that they bring in a defensive tackle alongside, because Sheldon Richardson's a very fine defensive tackle. I mean, he might be a little overpaid, but it's not like that cap needs to go anywhere else right now. But when Olivier Vernon,
this is an interesting conversation. We'll have a good conversation on Sheldon Richardson in a couple minutes.
All right, I'll be glad to listen to you. And Olivier Vernon, when on the field, he's a talented defensive end. The problem being, can he stay healthy? But right now, there's a lot of, even Myles Garrett, I think, gets paid maybe roughly around $10 million, around there, because he's the number 1 pick. A lot of cap on that defensive line. But I feel personally that they need to bring in a defensive tackle that can push Larry for maybe even to start over him, because while he's a fan favorite, he's underperformed, and that's the bottom line.
Oh yeah, I agree.
I guess what are your thoughts on maybe I guess I forgot to ask, like a free agent? Either one of you, John, you can chip in after Brendan. Like a free agent out there, defensive lineman that kind of strikes your eye, if that's something that you would go after, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, with Ogunjobi, I mean, he's played a ton of snaps the past 2 years, which was different from his rookie year. He played 300 snaps his rookie year and played very, very well as Danny Shelton's backup at nose tackle. Past 2 years, like you said, he's just been very, very mediocre. He's been the worst defensive tackle by far the past 2 years to play 80% or more of snaps. People, they talk about the snap count, but the thing is, when you look at his number of snaps the past 2 years and look at other players that have played that many, his grade is just so much worse than theirs. It's not even close. So his reputation is way, way higher than it should be when you actually look at the way that he plays. To me, he looks like he lost a lot of weight. If you just look at him his rookie year, he had a lot more, I would just say a lot more fat to him, honestly, a lot more pudge. You saw it more with the power. I mean, he would just toss guys around. He was like an immovable object that could move really well when he was a rookie. And honestly, you saw a lot less of that his second year. And then this past year, I just thought we saw next to none of it. There were some plays, there's always going to be plays with him where like a backside guard on outside zone tries to reach him and he's able to just get in the gap and get in the backfield and make a tackle for a loss. And everybody's like, oh, Ogunjobi. Yeah. But like, that's once every 2 or 3 games that he does that, or maybe like even just once a game, where down to down, he's usually just getting his ass kicked. But everybody, watches the ball, which is fine, but they just don't notice that. So like, I remember like plays on the goal line last year, short yardage, where he's just getting mauled and he's getting destroyed, and you just can't have that on the D line. Like, we can say a nose tackle, but you really just can't have it at either defensive tackle spot. He was near 100, I think. He was ranked around 100 out of 130 defensive tackles or interior defensive lineman that played at least 20% of snaps, and then last out of all defensive linemen in each of the past 2 seasons that played 80%. So, yeah, I think I heard that, the staff wasn't pleased with the way that he looked. So I'm confident that they're looking for a guy to come in and hopefully take that starting job. Andrew Billings is a player that I'm intrigued by. He's just been, like we talked about, solid. And that's a position also, I'll say, where you don't really need like a great pass rusher at that position, because when you get in pass situations, you can take out a defensive tackle and put it in a third edge rusher, and now you got 3 edge players on the field to rush the passer. So you don't really need that guy to be a fantastic pass rusher. Yeah, you don't want to be playing 10 on 11 when they pass the ball, but primarily it's a run defending position. And I think Andrew Billings would be an example of a guy. And he also fits from an age standpoint, because when he came out of college, I think he was like 20 years old when he came out of Baylor. So he has to be only like 25 years old now. I haven't looked at it. Yeah. But he has to be young. So I think he's a guy that would fit their profile. So I'd be interested to see if they pick him up with the Bengals getting DJ Reader. And then with Sheldon Richardson, he's good. He's a solid 3 technique. In 3 days, he is due to make $6.5 million more dollars. And I think they're considering, this is just, I'll just say based on some things I've gathered, I think they're maybe considering their options when it comes to trading or, cutting him, what they can do with him. He's definitely overpaid. If you look at players that are paid the way he is at his position, it's all the top defensive tackles in the league. Like Hargrave got a contract that's similar to him, I think. And Javon Hargrave is way better than Sheldon Richardson. Like, come on. I mean, I like Sheldon Richardson as a player, but he is up and down. That's one thing with him, is you look at his grades during a season and it's just so streaky. And I think in the end of last season, it kind of showed in the way that he played sometimes that he probably wasn't giving his all. Like, I know that a lot of us felt that way about the Browns defense late last season, but he might have been a guy like that. So we'll see what they decide to do. I would be very intrigued by just the idea, if they're not pleased with the contract and the person, I'll say. I mean, Sheldon Richardson, he's been on 4 teams in 4 years, had a lot of issues early in his career, and he might be one of those Dorsey guys. That's what I'll call it. If they decide that they don't want to deal with him and they let him go in the next 3 days, I'd be intrigued by bringing in Andrew Billings at nose and bringing in Shelby Harris at 3 technique from Denver. And he graded around 90, I think, or 85 plus in 2018 when Woods was there, I believe. And he's just a very well-rounded defensive tackle. I think he's rushed the passer well the past 2 years, good enough against the run. But I think he would be, as long as he's, got the age. I haven't looked at exactly the entire profile as far as the age, and you never know with the character on players. We just go on what we hear. We don't have the whole picture like they do. But I would be very intrigued by that if they decide to move on from Richardson. But like I said to start, he was their 3rd highest graded defensive player on defense last year, 3rd highest defensive player last year by overall grade. And I think he's a net positive on the field. So if they want to keep him, that's cool. But I'm going to defer to them on that, because they're the ones that have to deal with the contract, working around that, and also the person day to day, because that's things we're just not privy to.
Yeah, that's a smart move, letting them decide. John, I know
obviously it's always up to them, but I'm just saying, you know what I'm saying? I'm not going to give a strong take on it. I'm not saying.
Oh, no,
I
was agreeing with you.
I'm saying, if they cut him, I'm gonna try to kind of hint at why on Twitter because I'm never gonna assassinate someone's character. I'm just not gonna do that. We're not in a position to do that. You guys get what I'm saying? That might be a reason why they would move on, and contract is also a thing. So something to consider.
Yeah. I wasn't trying to sound smart assy. Sorry if I did. I just meant that's one of those questions where it's so hard to answer because, just think of a pro con list. It's about split 50-50. There's a lot of things Sheldon Richardson can do for your team. Like you said, third highest graded player, probably a net positive when he's on the field. But, the 4 teams in his career, the problems we know happened early in his career, could there be character issues? And then the money, obviously. But it's something
$13.6
that,
million cap hit.
yeah. So there's a lot of things.
For 3 days from now. So they've got 3 days to make the decision. And once Friday passes, he's either on the team or he'll be playing for someone else, or maybe he'll be one of those surprise cuts that everybody will be shocked by. But the thing is, if that happens, you guys won't be shocked by it because you'll have seen it coming.
Yeah,
Correct.
I'm not gonna lie. I hadn't even thought about. I haven't even played with that thought at all.
Yeah.
But now we'll be able to be like, yeah, you weren't at LeisterFootball.com. You would have known that. You're lost, people. But
I mean, I didn't write about it. Yeah, you guys see what I'm saying.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Everybody listening to this is going to go, they won't be shocked if it happens. They'll be like, they heard it here. So that's fantastic.
Yeah. So John, I know we'll do this quick and then we'll try to quickly do linebackers and cover guys.
Wait a second. You guys are aware they just signed someone, right?
I was just going to say, can we break some news on the podcast real fast?
Yeah, break some news on the pre-recorded podcast.
So yeah, as we were recording, they announced that they signed B.J. Goodson, the linebacker from Green Bay, and previously the Giants, I think, before that.
B.J. Goodson.
But yeah, yep. So yeah, it's curious. I mean, I saw what's Clev TA put on Twitter that he had a slightly higher grade than Schobert last year, and was okay in pass coverage as well. I mean, everybody on Twitter was burying his coverage skills and the fact that he gets hurt a lot. So, but there were highlights real fast he's a thumper, that's for sure. So he's going to knock somebody out of their cleats. And,
do you have the contract in front of you? Do you know how much?
1 year.
No, I don't.
I don't know the numbers, but I know it's 1 year. That's what I saw.
Okay.
1 year fully guaranteed.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of I think that's the third Green Bay linebacker to be signed by a different team now, if I'm not mistaken. So that's just a little
Blake
odd
Martinez
tidbit.
definitely signed somewhere else.
They all watched the 49ers game.
That's true.
Oh, man, that's funny.
I mean, I'm just looking at.
Or they didn't watch them. That's my bad. I messed that joke up. They didn't watch the 49ers game.
I understood what you were saying.
Yeah, they didn't watch it.
So I'm looking at his profile, and the first thing I notice is his number's 93. I honestly don't know anything about him. His weight's only 241, so there's no. Is he any? Brendan, do you know anything about him? Number 93.
Yeah, I think what's gonna happen is he'll probably compete at Mike linebacker. That's what I'm gonna assume, and he'll compete with Sione Takitaki for that spot. And I think that it's safe to say that he's a thumper, plays a ton of special teams, 165 snaps on special teams last year. Like that's a lot of special teams.
Wow.
He's played 705 snaps in 4 years on special teams. So this is clearly a guy that, maybe Prefer likes him. So if he doesn't get the starting Mike linebacker job, he can play special teams for them. But I think one thing about this move is if he were to get the starting job at Mike linebacker, this is a player that you probably take off the field, put in a sub linebacker or a safety for in pass situations. Okay. That's the way that I would view this. And I think there's a good chance that that's the way they're going to look at things. I think Woods is. I've heard from, people around like Denver media and stuff, and they told me that Woods is very into hybrid players, like very into guys that can play safety as well as nickel and safety as well as playing linebacker. And so I think that Goodson's not that type. He's the thumping linebacker. What I'm saying is, maybe he's in on rundowns, and then you put in a safety for him at linebacker, like Adrian Phillips, for example, if they can sign him. And now that's your, pass down linebacker, even though he was playing strong safety on second down. So that's just kind of how I'm viewing this. He was only in coverage 108 snaps last year out of 305 snaps on the field. Only 219 snaps in coverage out of 513 snaps the year before that. So this is clearly not a guy that his teams are looking to have in coverage a whole lot. I mean, he only had 11 targets in coverage last season and gave up 10 receptions. But his tackle grade is really good. He's only missed 10 tackles in 4 years on defense.
Damn, that's what they need.
Holy.
So Browns have been missing. The Browns have been missing that the past few years.
Yeah, I think that's something. Again, like you're just looking for like solid, and if you can just stop the bleeding on defense, and part of
linebacker
bleeding is angles and getting guys on the ground. So yeah,
I'm not going to sit here.
I'm not going to sit here and be like, I love this signing, fantastic stuff, all that. But I think it's important to just look at the way they're probably going to use the guy. And yeah, he'll probably compete with Taki. Hopefully Taki takes the job, makes this guy be the backup. But in the event that he's the starter, so to speak, on rundowns, we kind of know what we're getting into. And I don't see him being a guy that plays on pass downs. I just don't. I don't buy that at this point.
Yeah, that's fair, especially with what the data says and what he's been in the past. I guess we don't have to talk on this too long because I know you said that, looking at the draft, you thought left tackle, you've thought left or right tackle, and now you are really thinking left tackle. But with what you just said about Joe Woods being really into hybrid type players, I have to bring it up now. What Isaiah Simmons, if he's available at 10, I know John would fall out of his rocking chair.
Yep, big time.
So obviously Isaiah Simmons, you watch him, and there's not many players like him in the NFL, really. But would you feel comfortable taking him at 10, whereas he is listed as a linebacker? He has the coverage ability to make him more valuable than what a thumping linebacker does in today's NFL. So what would your thoughts be if for some reason at 10 they thought, well, we're getting a half safety out of this. Like we're getting a kind of safety guy who can also has covered the slot a lot in college. What would your thoughts be?
Yeah, I you've alluded to my website. I've watched basically all of his. We have playlists for PFF, and it's like key plays. So like you can watch like a prospect's all of his key plays from a season. So anything that he was involved with where something significant happened. So I studied that and I took notes on him. I did a write up, a summary, comparison, all that stuff. I view him much more as a linebacker than a safety. I think some of the plays that people, there's these like flashy plays that were made. Like, for example, this is the play that everybody always shows. They show the play where he lines up single high to start out, and he rolls to the deep half in cover 2 against Ohio State. Justin Fields stares it down the entire time, doesn't hold him on the hash, and it's an interception. Everyone goes, oh my God, he just made that play from center field. How did he do that? Well, the reason because they showed single high and they rolled to cover 2, and he ran like he's just going to his zone, and the quarterback stared it down and threw it right to him. Like any fast player could have made that play, but that's the play everybody wants to look at to start out on all these highlight videos. Like that kind of bothers me. That's not an instinctual play like Earl Thomas is, that's not the type of play that these free safeties, are making. Like any safety is going to make that play. That's what I'm saying. That's not something that you're projecting forward being like, wow, what an incredible safety prospect. Yeah, I view him as a linebacker. I think his biggest strengths right now I studied him, like I said, I studied him actually more than any player in this draft class so far, but I think he's best as a blitzer. I think he's best as a spy. I think that's his two best skill sets his two best skills at this point. I don't love his instincts in coverage. Like there's times where he passes off routes that come into his zone when he shouldn't. There's times where he doesn't cover routes that come into his zone. He'll, leave his zone and cover the linebacker next to his. Like it'll end up where there's two guys covering the same man and you can tell it's on him. And then there's a bust and the receiver catches the ball. Just for example, I think that Clemson kind of did him a slight by moving him around so much, because he's not great at any one thing except for the athletic stuff. Like he's a fantastic athlete as a spy. Like, he's good. He runs a 4.39 and he's, long. Like he can just spy the quarterback or a running back and just go get him, because his closing speed is incredible. But in coverage, I just think there's a ways to go. And also, like when you watch his snaps in man-to-man, if he's facing a quicker guy, like a guy that runs really savvy routes, I just don't see the change of direction skills right now and just the experience in those situations to really be good at covering one-on-one. So I just have questions with it. I'm not quite as high on him as some people. I do think that his talent level is that of a first-round player, but I would prefer that they take a tackle at 10. And I also think someone is going to fall in love with him before 10, and he's already going to be gone by that point, most likely. I think with him, it's going to be a situation where, I mean, we've already talked about this a few times, but it's so important with defensive players. Usage. You got to put him in the right role. You got to put him in the right situations. Have him do what he's good at early. You don't want to have him at safety. Like, you don't want him in the middle of, like, in the deep middle, getting looked off by safeties and having to change direction in tight quarters. Like covering the slot. Like, yeah, he did that in college, but that is a very typical Sam linebacker role at the high school and college level. Like Darren Lee played that role for Ohio State a few years ago. Those players transitioned to inside linebacker in the NFL, and that's a completely different game when you're playing between the tackles as a linebacker and you have to read guards. And Simmons is very raw in that aspect, and that's something he's going to have to do if he's playing well linebacker. But then if he's playing safety, now he's going to have to play in space a lot. He'll get matched up on receivers sometimes and really good route running tight ends in space. So I have a lot of questions about that, like in the box defending the run. Like there's going to be plays where, like I said to someone earlier on Twitter, like there's going to be plays where he's just like, he stands and he's got his eyes in the backfield and he doesn't really like read what's coming, and he stands there and the running back's just through his gap. And those are plays that happen because he's just not that experienced in those roles. And I think he was really cut thin, and he's kind of like a jack of all trades, but a master of none. But if you get him in a lot of situations where he's blitzing, like as an interior blitzer, coming on stunts and twists and off the edge, get him matched up on especially like tight ends and pass protection and slow-footed tackles, and also spying quarterbacks, I think that's where he'll be at his best. I've compared him to Jamie Collins early in his career for New England. I think that is the type of player that he has the potential to be like. Jamie Collins at one point played safety for Southern Miss. He played defensive end and linebacker for Southern Miss. By the end of it, he was playing defensive end. He was a rusher. And then New England drafted him, moved him to linebacker. That's the type of player I view him as. I don't think of him as, you know, the bigger Tyrann Mathieu. Because what makes players like Mathieu special, it's their change of direction ability because they're smaller guys. And Simmons he does not change direction like that because he's a long-limbed, you know, long athlete. He's more like a Collins or even a Ryan Shazier.
Okay. Breaking more news. Browns have agreed to terms with safety Carl Joseph.
Okay.
So, who I really liked coming out of West Virginia. That was one of the guys that I really enjoyed watching.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Brendan, but I think he was graded good, like you said, good enough for PFF last year. He's the kind of guy you want.
Yeah, I'm going to bring him up right now. You guys can chime in on Simmons. I know that I have a different opinion on him, and I'm sorry that was long-winded, but I just think there's like a lot of nuance to the whole thing. And it's going to depend on the defensive coordinator, but if Woods loves him, I'm open to it. It really comes down to that.
Oh, this is...
Yeah, I'll let you talk, John. Sorry, I've been interrupting you a lot.
No, it's totally fine. I mean, this is, honestly, this is one of the reasons, well, it's, pretty much all the reasons why, bringing you on the pod is fantastic because, it's that nuance that you can deliver that, we probably just don't have the same access to or the same, film watching skills
knowledge.
And the same, just the whole, it's what you do, for a living. And so, you know what I mean? Like your knowledge of it, your insight of, is better and just more acute. And so, that's great. Like, I can totally understand, I can see the interception that you're talking about, the play on the sidelines, like where he caught it right before going out of bounds. Like I remember that play and thinking, oh my God, this guy's everywhere. And so, you're right. If you're untrained, like, we are, like you look at it and see, flashes of brilliance and really it's like, yeah, but Fields, kind of just threw it right to him. So, But yeah, and so that's it is what it is and everything like that. So, but I'm glad that mentioning the part about that he's not a bigger Tyrann Mathieu, like because we had talked about it being similar to what's his name, Minka Fitzpatrick, and they're very according to you, like they're very different players, and so I think that's good. Like that's good to say because I don't want to we're trying to talk about some of these players here, and I want to get things right and be accurate, obviously. So, but yeah, I mean, and the need for tackle is obviously big. So, you know what I mean? But like you said, it's probably a moot point because he's going to get taken in the first. Once he ran that 4.39, like it's over. Like he's going, in the top 6 for sure.
Dave
So.
Gettleman fell in love with him in at senior day.
Well,
No, but Dave Gettleman probably fell in love with him watching that 40. Yeah, Dave Gettleman's gonna take Isaiah Simmons or Mekhi Becton. I mean, I would put money on that at the Vegas Superbook.
I think he might take
ghost
both Wirfs. I think he might take Wirfs.
The ghost of Al Davis
or
will haunt
worse.
the draft.
Anyone that had a great combine.
Try to
Dave
take
Gettleman's licking his chops.
Yeah, basically, absolutely. So, but yeah.
But yeah, so Carl Joseph, John,
From
you
the
like
Gators.
him?
Yeah, I
would
mean,
you?
it's always tough. Like I say, when he was coming out of West Virginia, this was so when the Browns were really when they had the first pick in the draft every year, and with Sashi Brown, and before that era, even like that's when I tried to do like I was always on online, like looking at draft guides and trying to like watch film and just be like as much in tune with because the picks it mattered, right? All these guys we always had like a top 3 pick, a top 5 pick, and it was like, who are they going to take? Like what's going on, and so he just was one that stood out, and I just kind of I just liked his game, and I mean playing at West Virginia, but yeah, I mean I don't know, it's always tough, like these guys they're entering free agency for a reason, right? Like there's very few times when teams are like, hey, let's let this really good player walk. In fact, Austin Hooper might be one of those guys. Like it's a really head scratching move for Atlanta. Like I just don't, especially when they then they gave up a 2nd round pick to go get Hayden Hurst. Like, why didn't you just re-sign Hooper? Like, why did you feel like, you know what, let's get a worse tight end who's older and then also give up draft capital? Like, just sign the guy you had. It's $10 million. What are you talking? It's nothing. It's a.
I don't think they
Hurst
can
is
afford
already
it,
older than Austin Hooper.
I think that's what I had to
Yeah.
do it. Yeah, he is. He was a 25-year-old rookie. Yeah.
Yes, right, exactly. That was
Nice.
his famous. Yeah, he was 25 when he was drafted. So, but yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's bizarre. So Joseph, like I said, despite the fact that I liked him, I don't know. I mean, I didn't watch a ton of Raiders games and stuff except when we played them, and so I don't know. I got to look into this and see what's going on. But yeah, anything off the top of your head, Brendan, that comes to mind with him, or?
Yeah, I think he's just versatile. I mean, I remember at West Virginia, like you alluded to. I mean, I studied him coming out, and I liked him also, and I just remember that he had like really, really impressive flashes as a free safety, like as a single high safety. And some people, it was funny, the range of comparisons. There were smart people I respected. There were some people that would like compare some of the flashes to like Earl Thomas, like free safety. But then there was other people that actually compared him to Cam Chancellor, which is wild.
Whoa.
Obviously he hasn't lived up to either of those, but that was like this bizarre range of predictions people made or comparisons people made. But the reason for that is because on film at West Virginia, he did so many things. There were times where he would be this, like he's always been a big hitter. He's always been a physical presence in the middle of the field. That's been something he's always been good at, but he's also a good athlete. So he'd be able to make these rangy plays like we're alluding to with, what people thought they saw from Simmons, where, maybe the player is middle of the field safety and he reads the quarterback's eyes and breaks and makes a play on the numbers or something. Like that's an impressive rangy play. So he does have those physical skills to do that. But yeah, just as far as what he's done with the Raiders, like last year he played as a free safety 315 snaps. He played in the box 177 snaps. As a slot corner 53, as a wide corner 16. So they were probably in man-to-man in those situations. He was matched up on a tight end and they flexed out the tight end, so that's where he would have followed him out wide.
Okay.
But then you look at the year before that, and no, it was 2 years. I was looking at this a couple minutes ago. So then 2 years, So then it's 349 snaps in the box, 109 at slot corner, 376 at free safety. So this is a player that can play deep. He can play as a strong safety. He can play in the box. I think it's exactly the type of player that Woods is looking for, where it's a versatile guy on the back end that can provide. And again, we're talking about solid play throughout his career. It's all green. That's color coded grades. So like green is just solid. It's 69.9, 74.5, 67.7, 67.6. That's his grades overall. There's no 40s and 50s here. It's not a player that's been bouncing up and down. It's just solid. He took like a slight step back from 2018 in coverage this past season. It looks like just, based on the grades, and I'm going to admit, the grades, there's always missing context, like how I've alluded to, like a player, how he was used. Maybe he could have been used a little bit more efficiently, which would have bumped up his grade a little bit higher, or maybe he was maxed out and his grade might go a little bit lower. So you never know. But yeah, like he had a 94.5 pass rush grade in 2017, which is pretty wild. I mean, he had 6 pressures that year, but he didn't have a lot of pass rush snaps. He had 6 pressures on 15 pass rushes. So that's pretty impressive. Yeah. And the rush grade tells me that he was beating people getting to the quarterback, because if he was unblocked, he wouldn't have had a good rush grade on those snaps. But yeah, run defense grade 78.2, 77.1, 78.1. So yeah, I think he'll probably be a strong safety for them, which was a massive need. I think of Sheldrick Redwine as more of a free safety, and I think that we'll see what they do at free safety, but he might get a shot to compete. But I think that Carl Joseph definitely starting strong safety, player that could potentially play some big nickel as well. If you want to have 3 safeties in the game, he could come down near the line of scrimmage and play as a big nickel. And then also, like we alluded to, if you want to take Goodson off the field on a pass down and put in Carl Joseph, and hey, maybe you blitz him, maybe you spy him, maybe you let him play an underneath zone or robber in the middle of the field. He can do all those things. So yeah, I like that pickup, and it was something that he was a player I kind of thought the Browns might be targeting, but there's just so many safeties this year that it was hard to tell exactly which one. I would expect that they'll sign another one, probably, maybe even 2, and then probably draft one as well.
Excellent. Oh
yeah, the overall grade last year ranked 38th out of 102 safeties last season, and then his 78.2 run defense grade ranked 13th. So
yeah,
played pretty well. Just a solid,
good
player.
At all. My bad, John. Thank you for the text.
Yeah, you're good.
Good thing I only said one thing. I was just about to ready to say one thing. While you mentioned that he only had 15 pass rushing snaps, which isn't a big number, but if you look at it as he's a safety, maybe they let him go on 1 or 2 blitzes a game and he gets there a little under half the time. That's something that the quarterback has to watch out for. And
right.
And then the other thing that stood out to me, which it is a big deal, because everything that I have seen the Ravens do this offseason leads me to believe that there's no reason outside the Chiefs they'll be the best team in football. They filled in their one problem, which was their biggest problem, which was getting to the passer without a blitz. So they went and got Brockers and Calais Campbell. For that Calais Campbell trade killed it just broke my soul.
Yep.
And so Carl Joseph being a good run defender, I think you said he had 78 grades around there.
Yeah, so it's just good. That's just like good, solid play. I don't always throw the numbers around a ton because people don't understand the context of the numbers. Yeah. But yeah, I'll just say he's been good as a run defender consistently. The one question with him is health. He hasn't played he's only played 575 snaps and 509 snaps the past 2 seasons. So I think during his career, he's been a guy that's gotten banged up. So
I was just looking this up because he ended the season early last year. He played 9 games, I think, and it was a foot injury. And I was trying to get the details on it. It took me a second. So it ended up where the foot injury was plantar fasciitis. which was swollen for a long time. So they couldn't even get a read on it because they had no idea. They had to wait till the swelling went down. But it ended up where they put 2 screws in his foot. And this says here, a couple screws inserted, is expected to be good to go when teams' off-season programs start next April. So I don't know. I mean, maybe the injury is fortuitous timing for the Browns because, maybe if he doesn't get injured, he just re-signs in Oakland. And, seems like from a depth standpoint, from a, just having solid bodies on the roster, this seems like a fantastic move.
Yeah. Did they say how many years the deal was?
1.
I don't have. Oh,
Another 1 year deal. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I like that because I like that they've got 1 year deals on these guys. The reason for that, it's no long-term investment when you've got Garrett, Ward, Baker coming up with extensions needed. And also there's pressure on these guys to play well because they want to get paid next offseason.
Yeah.
So I love that they're giving the 1 year deals. That's awesome. Just play really, really well this year and go get paid. Go get paid somewhere else. And then maybe you get a comp pick back for them if you don't go crazy in free agency next year. So, there's a lot of, there's just a lot of moving parts to this. But, I think there'll be 1 or 2. I mean, there'll probably be 3 plus more additions at safety this offseason. But I like that. I like that move. I'm excited to see what else they do with that position. He's also only 26 years old.
I was just going to say, all these guys are young too. They're not, there's none of these are like, they signed a 33-year-old linebacker to fill in, it's like, these are all young guys. So all
young,
the upside in the world.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think also you guys mentioned, you mentioned the thing, about not getting re-signed by Oakland. Well, he wasn't a Mayock guy. And I mean, we all know that happens a lot. Like he wasn't a Mayock guy. He's been there since 2016 when they had different coaches and all that, different management. So that happens a lot where teams let guys go, and he's been hurt a lot too, so it makes sense. I'm sure that they feel, they took the safety, the big hitter from a year ago. They took that kid in the first round last year. I forget his name off the top of my head, but he was hurt Jonathan Abrams. Exactly. Yeah. He was hurt his whole rookie year, but they expect big things from him. So he's going to play more of that role. Probably they're thinking, and they probably think they can replace him with other guys, and they probably can. Cause that's the thing with NFL players. There's a lot of solid or good NFL players out there. So, it's all about just, we'll see what happens.
Finding good players and not having black holes. I've been following your tweets about that, and obviously I listened to the PFF podcast with Steve and Sam. Sam has been really pissing off the Buffalo Bills fans, which just makes me laugh lately. He speaks the truth and they don't like it. He says his mind. But, it's been an hour and a half recording, Brendan. I don't want to hold you all night, so I've asked you everything that I wanted to get out of you. It's insane the amount I learn every time I bring you, you come on this show. So is there anything else you wanted to add about, this offense or the defense and what they've added or what they need to add, or anything you want to, sprinkle in?
I think one of their next signings is going to have to be a nickel. At this point, the only guys that have played they haven't even played regular season snaps at nickel, really. I think Tavier Thomas might have played 1 at nickel, but he's primarily a special teamer. Yeah. But Donnie Lewis Jr. played a little bit of nickel in preseason, and then Tavier Thomas played a little bit in preseason and tiny bit in the regular season, but they have nobody on the roster to play it. People, they keep arguing with me, hey, Terrence Mitchell can do it. Terrence Mitchell can do it. Well, no, he can't. It comes back again to the change of direction thing. I mean, it's just he is much more well-suited to play on the outside against outside corners where he's got the boundary to help him, all that. He can't play in space like a nickel needs to, in my opinion. I mean, who knows? Maybe they disagree with me and he'll prove me wrong, but that's just my analysis on it. He's graded very, very poorly in the small sample size of snaps that he's played as a nickel in his career. I think maybe his first or second year in the league, he played like a small, maybe 50 snaps at nickel or something, and he graded really poorly in those snaps. Ever since then, he's been primarily an outside guy. I view Terrence Mitchell as depth on the outside, Denzel Ward can't handle it. I mean, the nickel's involved in run fits a lot. You don't want Denzel Ward to be in a run fit. That would be stupidity. He is a prototypical outside corner. That's primarily what Denzel Ward is always going to do, in my opinion. And Grady Williams, same thing as Terrence Mitchell. Just he is an outside corner, doesn't have the change of direction skills to cover inside. I think maybe as his career goes on, you could get a little bit creative with Greedy. Maybe put him on some tight ends once in a while. That's something you might want to consider against some of these receiving tight ends, maybe because he's got that length and that that ability to go up and make plays on the ball in the air. But yeah, they just don't have anybody to play that position right now. And so I think that's one of the things that we'll see in the next day or two. I think they'll bring one in. I think Joseph, like I alluded to, I think he's a guy that can actually play as a big nickel, so as a third safety when they want to keep four defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, 3 safeties, and 2 corners on the field. I think Joseph can do that, but I think they definitely need a corner that can play inside.
Yeah, anybody, I was trying to look through the list and see if anybody stood out. I didn't really notice anybody, to be honest with you. That Nickel Roby Coleman, Ronald Darby, Mackenzie Alexander, Desmond Trufant just signed.
Yeah, so here's some of the nickels that are available. So Nickel Roby Coleman, he's definitely he's one of the best nickels in the league, hence his name. Logan Ryan, Mackenzie Alexander, that's a few of them. Okay. So yeah, there's clearly a connection to Mackenzie Alexander. Who knows if he gets a deal somewhere else? But there's a connection there with the Browns having the former assistant special teams coach from the Vikings. He's now the Browns special teams coach. So there is a connection there, and obviously with Stefanski. So we'll see what happens. But there's names beyond that also. Ross Cockrell. Man, that's a weird name. Weird name to say. A lot weirder than it looks. Nevin Lawson, Tremaine Brock. Those are just a few names of guys that can play nickel. So, yeah, we'll see what happens. But I would imagine the Browns are going to try to get one of those few top guys.
Yeah, that's a position that I've seen on you hounding on Twitter. It needs to be done. This is not a position that you can just try to put, Greedy or Terrence Mitchell in there. That is not their archetype at all. It just won't work. And you can't have another, we saw it with the Chiefs. Your defense can be, average, but you cannot have a bad defense and win a lot of games in the NFL. It just can't be done. I don't think that we're ever going to see, another I don't know if we're going to see a lot of defenses ever lead teams to championships like the old days. I mean, it's the new era is offense wins, but they've, PFF looked at the Chiefs in 2019 compared to 2020, and it's just the defense is astronomically different, and that's probably what made the difference.
Yep. Midway through the season, their defensive coordinator, I think, saved the season basically because they were getting torched in pass coverage at the linebacker level. And what he started doing was playing 3 safeties, and that completely fixed their underneath coverage, I guess. And they started giving up a passer rating of I don't know the numbers exactly, but I know that was a huge difference maker for them in coverage, was basically what we've been alluding to, and Steve Palazzolo says it a lot, is just getting back to average. You just get back to average. That's all you need to do on defense. Get back to average on the offensive line, get back to average on defense. And also, hey, if your quarterback grades out really, really well, maybe you got a shot.
Yeah. That's helpful.
Yeah. Patrick Mahomes is all right over there in the city. But, well, Brendan, we cannot thank you enough for having you on. It's always a blast. Again, you can find him at Brendan Leister on Twitter. I'll put all the links to him in the description to this podcast. Thank you so much for coming on. Seriously, it's always a blast talking to you, and it's nice to get a deeper understanding. I mean, I follow PFF, I study what they say, but it's also nice to hear someone that truly understands it deeper than I do try to explain it to me. And I can't thank you enough.
Man, thank you guys. I always enjoy it. And If you guys want to have me on in the next week or two, I'd love to come on again and keep talking about the Browns' needs, what else they've done, and also going into the draft, what they need to do.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
That'd be
I'd
great.
love that.
Yeah, I mean it's like going to school. It's really sitting here listening and and learning for like an hour and a half about football. Like, it's
Yeah.
great. And I don't think you can ever, learn enough, that's for sure. Or at least I know
Yeah.
I can't, but I mean, yeah, so this is phenomenal. I know that everybody that listens will appreciate it. So again, thank you very much for coming on, and we'll definitely have you back as soon as they get, more of these signings and deals sorted out for sure.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it. Have a good night.
All right,
Yep.
Brendan,
Stay
take
safe
care.
out there.
Yeah, you too.